Are you looking for a Chevy car, truck, or SUV? Go see my friends at Apple Chevy in Tinley Park. With over 500 new and used vehicles in stock, they have what you're looking for and at the lowest price possible. Go to applechevy.com. Tribune reporter Jeremy Gorner is with us. And Jeremy is part of a team that wrote an incredibly exhaustive story that appeared on the web and in the paper today of the death of Tyshawn Lee and some of the other things that went on here. And yesterday, when we were closing up shop in the 6 o'clock hour, we were talking to Mark Sapels, as we do often in the 6 o'clock hour, and we were talking about this is something that the gang violence in this town is something that people from here or people who have covered the news here. I'm born and raised in Chicago. I've been working in Chicago as either a broadcaster or a journalist for, well, longer than I wish to acknowledge at this moment. But
a long time. Close
to 30 years. And in college, I did my research on Chicago gangs. And this is this is the kind of thing that I've been thinking about basically my whole life, but thinking about professionally for 30 years. And I've come to this conclusion that we don't do enough in our business, in the media business, in the broadcasting business specifically, because newspapers tend to do a better job of this than we do. But we are so reticent, afraid almost, to call out gangs by their names. Police they've gone back and forth on this. They've at one point they wanted to do it, at another point they didn't want to do
because they thought it glorified them and gave them some kind of credit that they didn't deserve.
Right. But I think that's one of the reasons that we ignore what goes on more than anything else. Is that it's a black kid on the south side got shot, and if it's like a teenager. We're like, oh, there we go. There's another black kid on the south side getting shot, or west side, or whatever it happens to be, or the north side now. No, gang-related. Then all of a sudden a 9-year-old dies. And we're like, oh, my God, look at this. Jada Pinkett Smith is writing an editorial about it. I mean, everybody's
posted something on Facebook today. Jada did.
Everybody's up in arms about 9-year-old, as if this doesn't live within the same reality that happens with these 15-year-old kids. And again, they're 15-year-old kids. A 15-year-old kid in Winnetka, if a 15-year-old kid in Winnetka got killed, believe me, we'd be talking about it. Fox News would be on fire talking about it, right? But we need to look at this as one problem. And the only way to really get to the root of it is to identify what the roots are and identify who these gangs are, what they're doing. And the Chicago Tribune did what I exhorted Channel 9 to do, and Mark Sapels and I were all talking about this last night.
Yesterday.
The Tribune did it perfectly today. You explain, Jeremy, who these folks are who are, I guess it's a double entendre in the gang community, but who these folks are who are involved in this circumstance. Because it turns out that police believe that this young boy's family is intimately involved in gang activity, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I think that the point you're hitting on, Rowan, I think we're seeing this more and more over the years, that you are seeing like the names of street gangs being published more and more in newspapers, I think, than you did 10, 20 years ago. I mean, I remember looking at old Tribune clips of stories about violence when it was significantly more violent in the city 20 years ago, where they just would not name the gangs. But now it's like I think authorities are becoming a little more amenable to that. I know Chicago police has always been hesitant to do that, but I notice like the feds in a lot of their press releases, if they do like a big sweep,
they go after it. Yeah,
they name the gangs. I think there's two schools of thought here. It's like you have authorities that don't want to glorify them, they don't want to give them any kind of credit, but you have the other school of thought of, if you're somebody who's living in a community besieged by violence, you want to be educated as to who are the people causing problems in your neighborhood. And I think that's the school of thought that's at the other side of the coin, and you're seeing more and more of that, of why names of gangs are being publicized for that reason.
Well, as I mentioned yesterday, the University of Chicago in 1919 they started cataloging Chicago street gangs. Chicago street gangs go back, sort of like that movie Gangs of New York, right, where they go back into the 19th century and they look at gangs in the early 1800s, what was going on there. Mm-hmm. Well, in Chicago, ethnic gangs have always existed, and Chicago street gangs have always existed. I mean, if you read Roy Coe's book Boss, it opens with a scene on a beach on the south side of Chicago between rival gangs beating the crap out of each other, right? And Richard J. Daley being right in the middle of all of that. So this is not anything new. And now it's played in this, it's more of a racial dynamic because the majority of gangs now left in Chicago, the vast majority, are black gangs and Hispanic gangs, right? Primarily Mexican gangs. And a few Puerto Rican gangs, but that's not a very big piece of the pie. It just breaks down demographically with what else is going on. And there are I think one or two sort of known and considered to be highly dangerous white gangs that are left, that are particularly bloodless, right? And then you have all these other organized crime things, Eastern Europeans and all the, Romani and all the other things that they look for here, right? Mm-hmm. Now, going back to this, though, if you start to talk about the black street gangs in Chicago, people start to go, whoa, now, hold on a second. It's, there's a lot of other factors here. It has nothing to do with race. We're not talking about it having to do with race. This just happens to be what you're dealing with. So the Black Gangster Disciples, the Traveling Vice Lords, all the rest of the organizations, the big sort of umbrella organizations, are the ones that all have these offshoots now, and we need to identify what they are. And especially since they have factionalized to becoming such small groups, right? Mm-hmm. It used to be thousands strong in one group. Now it's dozens strong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So like the Gangster Disciples, for example, the Black Pea Stones, etc. They began to dissolve 20 years ago when all their leaders went to prison. And I mean, Larry Hoover's been in prison for years and years, but when he went to federal,
Gangster Disciples,
when he went to federal prison, I mean, that pretty much crippled them. That's where you saw a lot of these factions form. I'll give you, the police are saying that Pierre Stokes, who's Tyshawn's father, he's a reputed member of Kill Award, which is a faction of the Gangster Disciples in Auburn Gresham.
In the neighborhood in which all this happened. Living blocks away from where this young boy lost his life.
Correct. And Kill Award, I mean, there's several Gangster Disciple factions within Auburn Gresham. I mean, there's Kill Award, there's another one called G-ville, there's another one called 80s Babies. But the police are kind of operating on a theory that, a group from the Black Pea Stones, another historically large African-American street gang in Chicago, a faction called Terror Dome may have been behind this, and it's because of, and there's been kind of a back and forth, conflict between Terror Dome and between Kill Award, going back for years, but we know that within the last year there have been 4 or 5 shootings alone that have been kind of back and forth.
Now, Pierre Stokes, and Stokes is, by the way, an infamous name in Chicago gang lore, right? There was Fluky Stokes and Willie the Wimp, and there the Stokes name and family in that line of gang. We don't know if this father here, Pierre Stokes, is in any way related to that family. We haven't been able to lock that down, but it's an interesting thing that is being. That I think law enforcement and a lot of people have to consider here. So that could make, if he were that's a royal family in Chicago street gangs, right? Mm-hmm. That would be like a Hoover or Jeff Fort, right? His people that El Rukins, originally the Blackstone Rangers. I mean, that's the kind of thing that those people would seem to be. It would go to the notion that this young boy, innocent kid with his basketball, was executed as a message.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what, at least I was hearing from police sources, is that what the strongest theory was is that they couldn't get to the father, so they got to the son. That's not confirmed, but that certainly hasn't been ruled out. And of course, there's other theories out there too. Wrong place, wrong time. I think there was an initial report from the crime scene. I remember when I was out there that it was 2 cars that were shooting at each other. This kid got caught in the crossfire, but then later on, as the case unfolded, they started leaning towards this. he could have actually been targeted. But I just want to emphasize the police have not concluded that yet. Okay. It's still an ongoing investigation.
You talked to the father of Tyshawn Lee. And,
yes.
And I just want to ask you about that conversation, because having covered crime a lot in this town and covered some heinous crimes where young children are unintended victims in most cases, that often you find that there is some type of gang-related element, either a friend they were standing nearby or they were in the house where there was a gang member present and somehow they got hit. Mm-hmm. In this case, does this father of Tyshawn Lee believe in any way his own activities and his own choices in life impacted his son's ultimate death?
Not at all. I mean, when I talked to him, I started by asking him about his relationship with his son. He was a father. That was his only son. Mm-hmm. And kind of midway through that, I said, you've seen the news. You've seen Chief of Detectives Dean Andrews, essentially say that they're not ruling out the fact that your son was targeted. To which Pierre said he does believe that he was targeted because of just the way that his son was shot multiple times.
We have let me play that clip for you.
Well, what I can say is when I got on the scene, not an officer wanted to tell me anything. My son was out there on that ground in the coldness for hours on to hours. And I was trying to figure, where is the ambulance to come pick him up? Why is he out here for so long? Why ain't nobody come pick him up? And far as it wasn't a target, if it wasn't a target, he wouldn't have got hit so many times in the back of the face. You know what I'm saying? I think he was targeted.
So he's saying that because of multiple gunshots in his back and the back of his head.
Mm-hmm.
But then how can you disconnect that and say, I do believe he was targeted, but it has no connection to what I'm doing? I mean, would it have connection to what the 9-year-old was doing? Tyshawn?
Right. I mean, so what Pierre told me was that he doesn't have any idea why anyone would want to kill his son. He emphatically disagreed with the police department's characterization of him and how his, life on the streets may have contributed to all this. He even went as far to say that he hasn't had any beefs with anyone on the street for a while that would make somebody essentially angry enough to do something to him or his son.
But this neighborhood, though, has been plagued in the last couple of weeks by some pretty interesting and unusual violence within these couple of blocks,
unfortunately,
right?
Yes.
Disturbing, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's an emerging thing. Can I just... I know we're very short on time here, Jeremy, and again, this is great work you guys did today.
Really is.
Is there... I think that Chicago police probably are going to now move into a posture of getting ready for a pretty bloody next couple of days here, would be my guess.
And you hear this a lot. It's like Superintendent McCarthy even has been talking about ever since he got here in 2011 that much of the violence is retaliatory in nature. So I hear all the time from cops that whenever there's a heater case like this, you could bet that there's going to be, there's going to be more and more of it in the coming days. One of our overnight reporters, actually, the night after, hours after Tyshawn was killed, this wasn't reported. There was a shooting a couple blocks away. Nobody was hit. So obviously, there's some suspicion that this could have been, retaliation or an attempt at retaliation.
All right. Well, Jeremy, you did an amazing job. Your camera guy did an amazing job. Your photog. You guys call them photogs, right?
Yeah.
We call them shooters. we shouldn't call them shooters out loud,
no,
though.
not certain places.
All right.
We'll send you a shooter, we'll send you a photog. I don't think they care either way.
Exactly.
Send me somebody.
All right. Well, again, if people want to read this in the Chicago Tribune online, it's there. It's also in today's hard print, right? But the online, I think, is has been updated, I believe.
Yeah, I know that we updated the story. I haven't seen the updates today. I know that yesterday we updated the story pretty much every few hours.
Yeah.
I mean, from the time that we first published the gang connection. But, one thing to emphasize, though, is that Pierre did say that, he does believe that he does have regrets about what happened to his son for the fact that he says that he wishes that he was with his son because he thinks that his son would have gotten home safely. Mm-hmm. But, you never know. You never know. Could the people have been kind of
targeting him.
Exactly.
Yeah. And 15-year-old gang members are notoriously bad shots too, as we've come to learn.
And we'll find out. And we also believe that an arrest is likely in this case. So we'll just have to see what happens here. All right, Jeremy, thanks again. Jeremy Gorner from the Chicago Tribune.